right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going to be diving into the top CRO strategies for mobile apps. We're going to be diving in and giving an in-depth look on how to pursue effective conversion rate optimization strategies for mobile apps. As usual, I'm joined by James Ryan. James, thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to diving in.
All right, great to be here. All right, let's move on. There's a lot of kind of touch points and milestones where you can really focus on the conversion to help your app performance across the board. And all of these work together. It's an incremental improvement at kind of each point along the user journey. And if you can increase the optimization, if you can increase the conversion rate by 2, 3, 4, 5%, maybe 10%, at each of these stages, then overall you're going to get a huge boost in your numbers of users that are converting, your ROI on your paid marketing, your organic conversion, everything's going to be improved. So we'll look at kind of these different touch points. So basically, for those of you who don't know, conversion rate optimization is really just getting people to perform an action at a different step. It might be to install your app. That's the first conversion. And then do you get them through the registration? Are you getting them to use key features? And then of course, are you getting them to monetize? Are they buying that subscription? Are they making that in-app purchase? Or whatever your mechanism is for monetizing. So we want to make sure we're converted at each of those points. And it's particularly, again, really important with the mobile app ecosystem because of how competitive it is. Everybody who's advertising in this market is doing these different things to convert at the different points. The reason it's so expensive often to get someone to install your app is people are monetizing well for these apps, so they're willing to pay a premium to get people to install that app. So if you're not optimizing in a similar way, it's going to be really tough to compete on the ad front because of how much you're going to have to pay to get those initial installs. But it will pay for itself if you're converting it along the way towards your revenue point. And so we're going to look at a bunch of these different things. And again, as with everything that we've talked about to date, you can't just be one and done. You have to continue to A/B test, analyze, improve. There's a lot of tweaking over time to really optimize these things. But out of the gate, you can get some pretty good gains, some simple strategies. So again, this is kind of basic, but obviously you've got to make sure that you've got a super nice, professional looking, easy to navigate UI UX design. And I start with a screen to talk about this because it's just so important. It's not just about the functionality or the features, but it's really about, does it look nice, especially if you're in a competitive marketplace and other people are putting money into their design, into their graphics, into their usability. You really need to make sure you're set up properly from the get-go. And then also be cognizant of the fact that Android devices, iOS devices, different size devices are going to perform a little bit differently. You're going to have different lag times in some cases. You're going to have different screen sizes. So you want to make sure that your app is designed to respond to the different screen sizes and different different levels of operating systems, so that you can make sure that what you want to present is actually showing to the user. I've seen countless times where they're optimizing on one of the later model devices or a bigger screen device, and you go and test on an older model or smaller screen device, and all your key calls to action fall below the fold, and the user doesn't even see them in some cases. So you want to make sure that you're testing across these different devices as well as designing across the different devices to help your conversion. Anyway, so there's some kind of, we talked about pain point and converting people better at each of those different pain points. So your initial one is really your sign-up process, your onboarding flow, making sure that the user's understanding what your app is about, and navigation is simple and easy to understand. And then once they get into your app, again, if it's more complicated, you're going to have to potentially add tutorials or in-app messaging to make sure that the user understands what your app's about and what the features are for and how to use those features. And then as you move towards the monetization side of the flow, make sure that purchase flow is optimized. Your A/B testing price points. There's all kinds of things you can do at each of these stages to optimize your ROI. So kind of key to all of these changes you're going to make is really understanding your user's behavior. So it's critical that you're set up with the right analytics in place. There's a lot of third-party tools to choose from that help you to track and analyze what people are doing in your app. And the more that you can do that, the more effective you're going to be at knowing your customer. The better you know the customer, the better you're going to be able to optimize at these different pain points. So, right out of the gate, I often advise people, in addition to whatever kind of basic information, name and email address or phone number that you're collecting during the registration, it's often very useful to understand your customer better and what their needs are and what they're looking for in your app, and then trying to customize, towards those things. So as the person, follows the journey through your app, you need to be looking at places where there's large drop-offs, high friction areas. It used to be, you couldn't collect a phone number because people really wanted their privacy protected there. It's a little bit easier now to do the phone number. If you need a social security number, you're going to have to message, the user why that's important. Or again, that's going to be a big drop-off area, and you're not going to collect that data that's required to operate the app effectively. So again, be sure to be monitoring these different pain points, and then trying to improve your messaging around that, or just the setup flow around that, so that you can smooth that out for people and get them through and using your app. And then gathering feedback is so critical. So you can do that in a lot of different places. As I mentioned, kind of in-app questionnaires are a good place to do that, particularly during the onboarding when you're trying to introduce them to what you do as an app, and the questions you ask and kind of inform people about your value proposition. Once your app is launched and people are using it, closely monitor your user reviews, because your reviews is where people kind of tell you the things that they want in the app, the things that they don't like about the app, that things aren't working in the app. So you got to monitor those very closely. And then I like to do a lot of surveying of users and interviews with users outside the app and outside the review process, by inviting users to either preview maybe a future version of the app that has some new features in it, to make sure that that's a good user experience. Or just sometimes I just like to get a group of users together in a virtual focus group. It used to be you had to do these very expensive focus groups where people had to go to a focus group room, and you had a facilitator, and it was a super expensive proposition to do that, especially if you wanted to do it across the country or globally. Now it's super easy with video chat tools to organize a virtual focus group. Get 5, 6, 8 of your customers. They can be good customers. They can be customers who left your app. Sometimes those people are the most helpful at all. And you just get them talking in a group about their user experience. And it's a great way to learn in kind of a different fashion about how people use the app, what they're missing from the app, how you can do better at meeting their needs. So a lot of what you want to do, you can get from kind of cumulative data, but there's nothing kind of like personal insights from individual users to different touch points, your in-app data, any kind of in-person interviews that you can do to kind of triangulate, where you want to prioritize your new features or new mechanisms for kind of moving people through these different touch points. It's an incremental process, like little by little, you're going to be improving this, leveraging the user behavior, and hopefully, reach some kind of point where you have a positive ROI on both your paid marketing, and then you get a bonus with the organic users. So in terms of personalization, and again, I think there's something very special about mobile apps, compared to, desktop computers or some other kinds of, ways that people interact with digital products. This phone or this tablet is a device that people have with them every day. And I think the expectation now is that the experience isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all experience. You're going to be customizing, personalizing, based on how they're using, based on information that you're gathering from them. And I think there's an expectation for the app marketplace now, particularly if your competitors are doing it, to really kind of hone in on an individual person's behavior and needs, to provide them an experience that's really tailored to that individual. And again, collecting data so that you know who that person is going to be the first step in that process. And then the second is, how can you deliver kind of content that's dynamically, modified to meet the needs of that person, or at least gives the impression of that. So out of the gate, I know it's hard sometimes to go that extra effort to customize. It involves a lot, a dynamic backend and all that. But there's ways to do it. As you're collecting this data, there's a sense from the user that, hey, they understand me. They're asking me questions about my personal interests, my problems that I'm trying to solve with this app. And the very fact that you're asking for those questions, people are going to assume that there's some kind of, customization that's going to happen as a result. So at the beginning, as long as you're collecting the data and planning, to create more custom features, that gets you a long way towards assuring the user that you are personalizing, even if some of the more complex features haven't been built into it yet. And then if you can use algorithms and other things on the back end that are basically examining the data that's being collected and then channeling that into some kind of customized experience. And again, it can be based on gender or age or preference for a certain type of feature set within like multiple features that you have. But the idea is to start narrowing the user experience so that it's more focused on that individual user. I've worked with a number of companies that had a website, a mobile app, a desktop app, different ways that the user could interact with the same product. And you want to make sure as much as possible, and you can't always do that, but as much as possible, have that experience be integrated across those different devices that they might, including maybe just your website, so that it's a singular experience across all those different touch points. So the next thing I want to talk about is A/B testing, because this is the mechanism that you're going to be using to do those kind of incremental changes that are going to improve your conversion at each of the steps. So obviously, this is kind of A/B testing 101, but just to kind of remind you of the basic elements there, it's defining your goals, identifying those elements that you're going to test. This is very critical when it comes to monetization, because there's so many like little things that you can tweak. The color of your call to action button, what is the price, what is the pricing model, what kind of discounts you're offering, how are you presenting those discounts. So there's a lot of things, elements to test, and you want to try to test these incrementally so that you can actually tell kind of which things are moving the needle. If you try testing too many things at the same time, some might have a positive impact, some might have a negative, and everything kind of comes out in the wash. So really identify specific elements and then kind of track those through, give them a couple of weeks, and then kind of move on to other types of things you can test. A lot of tools out there, particularly on landing page marketing at the top of the funnel, but on down to the actual presentation of promotional offers or different price points. There's a lot of tools on the marketplace that you can use to really kind of help you do this kind of A/B testing in an effective method. The app stores themselves or the app platforms also have, the developer tools that allow you to do some of these A/B testing experiments. And again, these range from the very, top of the funnel where you're A/B testing your ads to A/B testing what is being presented to the user when they comes to the app store, what icon they're seeing, what images they're seeing. You can A/B test country by country. There's just a lot of different kind of mechanisms along the flow there that you can be doing this A/B testing. So to be sure to kind of take a holistic view of this, because again, the way you optimize is really to optimize, incrementally along the whole user journey. And then collectively, you're having a big impact by just making little changes that are improving things, 1 or 2%, but collectively it might be 20, 30, 40, 50%. It's very dependent on either your active user base or the number, your advertising budget. If you're driving a bunch of people into the app, you can obviously kind of do smaller incremental changes and then turn them around more quickly, because you're getting, hundreds, if not thousands of users through the flow. And unfortunately, as you move down the funnel, you kind of need more and more people and more time, because you have fewer and fewer users that are interacting with your touch point. So at the very top, like when you're doing A/B tests with your advertising, typically you can run things for a week and then, spend a few days or a week kind of analyzing the results. And then, at the end of the second week, you can kind of have a whole new campaign running based on your learnings from that first week. Because even for, a couple of $100 ad spend, you might get 100 people into the top of the funnel, and that's typically enough. It's kind of like when, people do surveys or polls, there's a margin of error, and you can, even with say 100 or 200 people in your test pool, your margin of error is going to be, say 3 to 5%. So even with a relatively small group of people, you can get a pretty good directional idea of whether or not the changes you're making are effective. When it comes to app development and making changes, say in your pricing page, there's a little bit longer turnaround because obviously the developers have to build in the changes. You have to submit it to the App Store, and then you have to wait to get enough people kind of moving through the funnel. And again, if you're doing something in your registration, it's going to be maybe that's similar to your advertising changes because you're going to get 100 or 200 people in that registration flow in the first few days. So you can have kind of a similar cadence where maybe you watch things for a week, and then you spend a week or two getting the new changes accepted in the App Store, and then maybe it's the third week you start your next cycle looking at the performance of those changes. I'd say if it's your pricing page and your revenue optimization kind of flow, and you're getting 1% or 2% or 5% if you're lucky, kind of reaching that point in the engagement cycle, the number is going to be so small that you're going to need probably at least double that time, maybe longer. I mean, a month ends up kind of being a long period of time when you're just getting started and wanting to iterate quickly. So hopefully you can maybe in 2 weeks, get enough users. And again, the smaller the data pool, the higher the likelihood that your directional data is going to be off. But I mean, I guess even with 20 to 30 people purchasing, you can start getting a pretty good idea. And maybe you're off by 8 or 10%, but it's probably enough of a directional indicator that you can move on from there. And you don't need hundreds and hundreds of users, or maybe even 100. Sometimes with 20 or 30, you can still get a directional indicator of whether your changes are working. All right. And again, this is, kind of looking at, in kind of a funnel visual, how we want to be approaching this funnel optimization. So at the top, again, in summary, you're analyzing user behavior and where people are dropping off. You're trying to get as much information from that user through personal interviews, if possible, to understand, how people are engaging with your app through kind of a more personal custom experience. You're, working to address any of these issues they're coming in, and preferably you're set up to do some kind of A/B testing at a lot of different points along the funnel to be able to more quickly kind of test out one version versus another. Versus you can do this asynchronously, but it takes longer. Asynchronously meaning you're not A/B testing at the same time, but you're running an A test, and then a week later you swap in a B test. Sometimes that's the only way to do it. It creates some variability because maybe your audience coming in that second week isn't as close as and matched to the first one as you'd like, but it is possible to do. And then you're just constantly monitoring and analyzing this funnel. And then I think at a higher level, you need to sort of try to integrate this funnel optimization with other types of strategies, the way you're personalizing up front to get people into the funnel and get them engaged in your app, so that when they come to your pricing page or your purchase page, they're going to be more ready to buy. So it is a very holistic thing, both to get kind of the incremental CRO conversion improvements at each step, but also holistically it's going to be the whole is going to be more than just the sum of the parts, as they say. So it's really important to kind of approach this with a complete funnel point of view to get your maximum results. All right, so that's it for CRO.